All right, let's try now to have a better conversation with Hügo Kruger, who is with the Truth in Energy Civil Nuclear, and he's an engineer there, as we talk about some of the issues around, rolling blackouts, what's happening at Eskom, and some of the proposals that have been contained in an independent report that has been done there by some of the experts. I do hope it's a better line. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Going through it, there are some various, bold proposals about how the issue of rolling blackouts can be dealt with. But before we even start with the possibility or even a proposal to shut down some of the power stations, let's talk about the issues at Eskom. We're often being told, even through parliamentary inquiries, that there are some issues of, some claim sabotage. There's also issues of coal. There's also issues of, what's happening on the ground. Are these the only issues, though, in your view, that have gotten us into where we are finding ourselves right now?
No, absolutely not. The report spoke to the root cause of load shedding, where they highlighted the procedural issues and they highlighted the management incompetency. Now, Toyota, when it became a great company, instituted a root cause analysis, a process, and they asked the 5 whys. In my view, they only had the 4th why. They're not asking the 5th why. Why is the management of procedures so opaque, as the report rightly says? Why is it that they are not ISO 9001 compliant, for example? And the reason should be that we need to look up towards Eskom. You've got 3 ministers, okay? We need 1. We can't have a minister appointing boards, setting policy, and 1 doing the executive's job. That, to me, is the root cause. It is the political environment. Dan Marokani has now been appointed as a new CEO of Eskom. He's a highly qualified man. He's got all the skills and the brains necessary to execute on that job. But unless we reform the political economy around it, he's going to end up like another Andre Reiter.
And there's also, of course, some bold proposals that, contained in this independent assessment. One looks at the issues around maintenance and the commitment that is needed in that particular regard. Another proposal to say, possibly look at shutting down the power stations, even if it means subjecting, the country to higher stages of rolling blackouts, but do the work that is needed. Do we have the skills, though, in order to be able to do that, in your view?
So we do have the skills as South Africa, but Eskom does not have the skills. Eskom, the report's quite clear that Eskom has, the staff has the theoretical knowledge. So there's nothing wrong with them in that sense, but they don't have the practical knowledge. Now, my advice to Mr. Marokani would be, phone up some old operators who are now in their 60s or 70s, who have had years of experience, those who grew up on the power plants, and invite them to come back and to work with the people, for example. That's one type of intervention that is desperately necessary. Ask the South Africans who've left the country, who work in the UAE, who've built a nuclear power plant for the UAE, 150 South Africans, won't you come back and ask us and come and help us, for example? Things of that nature is a type of intervention. So there's nothing wrong with the skill level at Eskom. As far as we can tell from the IQ tests and the things they did, of course, some staff refused to do it, and that's understandable. People are skeptical of those tests. But you need to bring them back in. But before we can even bring in these interventions, we need to face the elephant in the room. The government is responsible for this. And the government has to be held accountable. As to your point about imposing load shedding, I've been saying that for a long time. If you want to truly do maintenance, proper maintenance, you need to overhaul the entire fleet. So we're going to have to impose a permanent stage 2 load shedding and start it 1 by 1. But there's another point which was not part of the scope of this report. It almost touched on it. Eskom has a series of abandoned power stations like Duval 3, Rooiwal and Pretoria, and a few other power stations that the government could have fixed 5 years ago. But what they don't want to say is that this very same Minister of Electricity, when he was Mayor of Pretoria, switched down the power station at Rooiwal. I spoke to the DA's advisors in Pretoria. You can bring back that power station tomorrow. And the DA is going to do it, for example. So why did we switch down power stations when we had capacity? Why aren't we fixing the abandoned power stations? Because then you don't have to impose load shedding to recover our reserve margin. Why aren't we adding new capacity at Matola for natural gas, for example, to help with the reserve margin, also help solve the gas crisis? Those are the type of things that needs to happen at the moment. But we need to point fingers to the government solely because of the inaction and the indecisiveness. This is primarily a failure of government before we can blame the unions and the ground staff, and there's a lot of blame to go there as well.
And I'm going to get to some of the plans that, are being put in place and what do you think about those in just a moment. But then let's circle back then to the issue of, imposing rolling blackouts and all of that. Someone watching us tonight could say, I'm concerned if we do that, what then happens to, my business and also the economy? How then do we work around that?
So this is a difficult decision to take. Understandably, people will have pain, and it's not an election-winning issue because we're in an election year. But they need to understand the longer we wait with this, the more difficult it will be. The report is clear that some of the power stations have already had deferral of their midlife overhauls. You need to take a unit offline if you want to fix it. And the government has never been honest about this fact. Because no, it's not going to win an election to say it. And that's also been part of the problem, is that you have politicians intervening. And the report makes it quite clear that Eskom was chasing only one factor, which was energy availability factor. But effectively, it's like taking a car where you haven't changed the oil and the spark plugs and things for a long time, and you're just driving it. Yes, it's going to go to a point, but you're breaking it as you continue doing it. There are a few interventions they can do to target the partial load factors, such as changing the coal quality, for example. You can blend the low-quality CV coal with high-quality coal. That's one type of intervention. There's many ways to do it while it's on load. But ultimately, if you want to properly fix it, we have to accept that we're going to have to impose stage 1 or 2 load shedding, if not more. And the longer we wait, the more painful it's going to become.
So many questions arise from that. But as a final question then, what becomes, your view when it comes to some of the plans that have been proposed? Then we're seeing quite a number of them also proposing energy mix and all of that. Do you think these are sufficient to also get us out of the woods?
I think some of the plans that they're proposing, including some that the board are proposing, is downright ridiculous. For example, the long-distance transmission lines, where they want to spend something like 400 billion rand, to build a transmission line to the other side of the country. That is utterly ridiculous. The unbundling process, if they want to see what happens when you unbundle during a lack of security of supply, look at what happened in California with the Enron crisis. The politicians back rock, and since then there hasn't been an unbundling process. Look at what happened in Zimbabwe when they tried to unbundle. Unbundling must be set aside, and the sole priority at this point for Eskom should be add capacity to the grid. The fastest is take the units offline, start fixing the coal fleet. If you spend that 400 billion rand on overhauling the coal fleet, and the report actually says we don't need that much more money. You'd fix load shedding within 3 to 5 years. But the quickest way, I would argue, in the meanwhile, is fix the coal fleet and then send tenders out as soon as possible for natural gas at Matola, so we can help alleviate the gas crisis, and later on plan either for Mossel Bay or Richards Bay or whatever. It's ideal to bring natural gas in before you scale renewables in en masse, because renewables need 100% backup. Yeah. And we're going to burn diesel if we don't do that. And the gas will also cut the diesel bill in full, just to add that.
This report sounds, in fact, when one reads it, it makes for some interesting reading. 600 pages of it, really one engages with some of what is laid bare there. Lots of concern, but also, an interest in what's going on exactly on the ground. But do appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for engaging with us. That is Truth in Energy, civil nuclear engineer Hügo Kruger, who is talking to us about, this very serious issue of rolling blackouts. It continues to impact quite a number of lives. So we'll continue then to monitor what comes out of this 600-page report. Quite an interesting read, as one would say.